Hi, and welcome to the dpost.com sports chat here with talking about women's basketball today from WVU, talking here with our beat writer Todd Murray. Todd, how's everything going?
Great.
Good, and they're talking about the Mountaineers, and they're coming off a two-game winning streak. They'd kind of turned things around here recently with wins against Oklahoma State, and then most recently Kansas State.
Right.
And so, kind of talk about what they were doing right in those two games as opposed to, what they weren't doing earlier in the year.
Well, a lot of it had to do with who they play. They started off with Oklahoma, Texas, and Baylor. Three of the top teams in the league, and they knew it was going to be a very difficult start, and they had a chance, to win two of those games. They had Baylor and Texas on the ropes, and it came up short at the end. So the first three losses, not unexpected, but then losing at home to Texas Tech was quite the downer. That's not something that can happen. That should happen, and Mike Carey would say that was unacceptable. But didn't look good being 0-4 going into number 21 Oklahoma State in Stillwater. And Mike Carey made a lineup change, inserting Bree McDonald in there in place of a struggling Tiana Muldrow, and it just seemed like things seemed to click. And plus they got Jessica Morton, who became eligible when classes started for the spring semester. She came in there and provided a spark off the bench. They upset Oklahoma State. Then they had Kansas State in town the other night, and again, those two were huge. Morton scored a career-high 22 points, and Bree McDonald had 11. And right now there's a lot of confidence going into a two-game road stretch against Kansas and Texas Tech, two very winnable games for WVU. Kansas is winless in the Big 12. You win those two, you're back to 4-4 in the league, and anything can happen from there.
Yeah, you talk about the two new additions, and I guess they're not really new. They've been with the team since the beginning of the year, but Morton and McDonald are kind of picking up the slack a little bit for Bria Holmes, who just hasn't been shooting the ball quite as well. I mean, and a lot of defenses have been geared to stop her. So if you can get those two players to keep emerging, it kind of takes a little pressure off Bria, doesn't it?
Right. The best thing they're doing right now is they're making things happen offensively. They're penetrating against the zone, getting to the rim, or pulling up for short jumpers in the lane and making things happen. And that was not happening before, when WVU was passing the ball around on the outside against the zone, and they'd end up taking a bad three-pointer as the shot clock wound down. That those two have just provided such a spark of energy for the offense.
It's always kind of tough to, and I've always found it to be tough, when you have a player who's kind of emerging on the roster and starting for the first time, to really judge him by, the first couple of games of the season. But now that we're talking about we're in the middle of the season, your thoughts on Elle Montgomery and how she's come along? Is she better than what the coaches were expecting from her at the beginning of the year?
I'm not sure they knew exactly what to expect, because basically she hasn't played for 3 years because of a knee injury. She saw very limited minutes last year, and frankly, at the beginning of this year, she was not very good. They were getting the ball to her inside, and she couldn't put it in the basket. But as the season has gone along, she's gotten more and more minutes. She started to play better, and defensively, I mean, she had 9 blocked shots in the Kansas State game. That hasn't happened, and it's been almost 30 years. Georgianne Wells, the great player from the 1980s, last did it in 1985, and she's just she's starting to establish herself as one of the top centers in the Big 12. And the good news for WVU, she's just a sophomore, and her offensive game still needs some work, but the way she when you're 6'5", hold your arms up, she's really making life difficult for other teams, and it's just been her emergence has just been huge for WVU.
All right, and that is it for us today. Continue to watch more updates on the women's basketball team throughout the season here on the dpost.com.